Hey, welcome back to the RatRig V-Core 4 printer build. In the last video we did the frame, and that's what you're seeing here right next to me. In this video what we're going to do is install the Z-axis, so that's the next step in their instructions. We are going to put in the linear rails, the motors, and kind of progress through that, and that's what will hold the build plate. So let's get started. I have all the parts necessary to get the initial part of this done, and at some point I'm going to have to stop and kind of set up the stuff for the next ones, but we'll get to that here in a bit. I'll show you what we have so far. So what you're seeing here, let me just point out a few different things. So your linear rails, there's going to be 3 of them, vertical for each. They pair with a lead screw. So it's basically balanced on three different points. We have the NEMA 17 stepper motors here. There's also 3 of those, so you start to see a pattern here. These are all sets of 3. So we have the Z stops. These are 3D printed parts. This pillow block, which is the mount for the thrust bearings on the bottom, that mounts right above the motor down here. And I have some of the hardware set up. So we've got some of the screws. What's kind of unique about this, and we'll probably get more into it.
These are what the manual calls bimaterial lead screw decouplers, but basically what they do is they decouple the lateral motion or any wobble that the lead screws have that hold the table up and down. They decouple any of that lateral movement from the rotational, so they still move up and down, they still rotate with that lead nut, but they allow the Z lead screw to wobble without messing up the build plate.
So let's get started. The first step here is going to be to install the linear rails. So they go here, here, and then one in the back as well. And so to get those started, I'm going to start by putting the T-nuts on and kind of prep everything. Now, one thing on these, you want to be very careful. So these roll really nice. And so nice that if you pick it up wrong, this can slide off the end. And if this slides off the end, the ball bearings in here will just pop out and they fly all over the place. I've done this before. I'm hoping to avoid doing that again. All right, so I'm going to attempt to align each one of these vertically and see if I can get this to align. Oh, we got one that's kind of mismatched there. So far, so good. Hopefully you can see I just put this on with all the screws still loose. So that should give me the ability to come back and adjust and make sure everything's nice and vertical and perfect afterward. But they're going to go on just about like that. Let's do the rest of them.
Unfortunately, my mic died while I was working on this, but basically I'm just assembling the rails and getting those set up to be installed. So these are the last 2. As you noticed before, I did install them sort of loose. I didn't tighten anything, and that's because towards the end, those little green pieces that you can kind of see in the frame, those will be used to align them so that they're perfectly aligned with the T slot that's vertical. So assuming everything we measured before with those is accurate, then these should be pretty well aligned themselves. So I'm going around, I'm installing all 3 of them, and then I'll go through and align all of them as well. We're going to do the alignment. Oh, that's kind of cool. So that should center it. Yeah, that works pretty well. Okay, so we're going to work our way up from the bottom as it said. I'm just going to give it a little bit of tension on each one. I'm going to come back and tighten them further. Give it a little more tension. It's weird, I thought those would tighten up faster, but each time I come by, they take a little more. And I'm just putting a little bit of tension, I'm not putting a lot.
Okay, so the next step here is to install the Z end stops that go on top of each rail. And what these are really doing is just stopping the carriage from being able to come off of the rail, which could potentially cause problems. These are pretty simple. They just install with one screw and T-nut, just like a lot of the other components. And you can't really see it here, but it screws in from the back of that rail. And here I'm just sort of testing it, making sure that it actually stops that. I didn't really like the way it was aligned, but I think that had more to do with how I screwed it in, so I was just kind of adjusting it.
Alright, alignment tools.
So the next step here, I'm just aligning the other side. Just go through that quick since you've already seen it.
Alright.
And then the next step is just to throw that end stop on there, and this side's good to go. And you can see from this side a little bit better. And there it is, stopping the carriage from coming off.
So after tightening the two front rails, I went ahead and did the back one too. It's pretty much exactly the same process. Put in the two alignment clips, and then slowly work along, tightening each screw just a little bit at a time, and then kind of passing back through until all of them are good and snug. I did that so that I wouldn't end up making anything out of alignment, make sure everything's perfectly straight. Then the last thing to do is just put the end stop on the top, and all the Z rails are done. The next step is to install the Z motors with these screws here and the pillow blocks. The screws will drop through the pillow block, through the bottom floor of the printer, and then into the motors. These will hold the thrust bearings that the table and Z screws will sit on. Another thing to consider is the direction of the cables in the motors themselves and how you want to run them. So that's something I thought of here. This is also the exact moment I realized my microphone had cut out. Are you kidding me? My audio cut out?
Okay, so these motors have a plug here. And I don't know what direction. Do I want the cable to go that way or that way? I'm going to go ahead and guess backwards. So we're going to put them in like this. Okay, so now that I got that kind of up there, I'm going to balance that on my fingers. This thing's starting to get a little heavy. Once I get these started, I shouldn't have to hold the motor up anymore. I think that's going to hold. Good, so now that that's there, we can run the rest of these screws in. Seems good and solid. Just going to do all the motors at once. That seemed to work pretty well, so we'll just do that all the way around. Might have to do it with my fingers. But that worked just fine, I think. One more motor to go. One I think is kind of obvious. I should shoot it off to the side because there's a hole for that wire to come up here. I don't think it's just that wire. Maybe I should still go back. No, we'll go sideways. Check that out. All right. Looking at this a little closer. Let's see what we got here. So this is the motor coupler, and I think technically you could get away with just putting that right on here. So I'm kind of surprised they didn't do it that way. But at the same time, I think it's kind of cool. They have us using these thrust bearings. So I get that they're kind of hard to see there. So these are gonna fit together. They kind of create the bearing race. Said I could put a little bit of 3-in-1 oil in there. I don't think this is the same. I'm a little concerned it's not the right stuff, but it's got to be better than nothing, right? Basically, we're going to put one of those down. We'll put that down. Put a couple drops of oil. Oh. Make sure I have the right Allen wrench before I get too carried away here. Ooh, I like how that feels real sturdy. Okay, I could tell that that's turn on the motor. That feels real solid. Okay, perfect. Cool, I like how that worked. Oh, that's rock solid. I like that. So I think I know why they did these this way. This is a big printer, and that build plate weighs a lot. So instead of all the load going down into the motor and the bearings in the motor, it will sit on these little pillow blocks, is what they call them, and that axial thrust bearing. So that makes a lot of sense, actually. So I'm glad they did that. So let's go do the one in the back quick, and then we'll start installing the lead screws. The next step is to install the Z-axis lead screws. There's 3 of them, so 1 for each motor. And they sit into the shaft couplers that we just installed a little bit ago. And when you tighten that screw, the sort of clamshell nature of it, it clamps onto the lead screw. One thing I noticed though is that I put them all the way in the bottom, so they're just sort of sitting there on top of the motor shaft. That later ended up being a bit of an issue, so I'll have to adjust it after. And then we'll do the last lead screw, installing that in the back of the printer. So just securing, making sure that's good. Then kind of inspecting and making sure everything's ready for the next step. The next step will be putting in the actual carrier that mounts all this and ties it all together. So we'll jump into that here. I figured out the next steps. Basically we have these. These are the part that hold the bed and mount to the bearing on the linear rails, as well as mounting to the lead screw. And so this is where all of this stuff comes together. So we're going to assemble these really quick. Basically the lead screw nut, or the lead nut, I guess, I'm not sure what you want to call that, mounts on one end. So we'll screw this together. The other side mounts to the underside of this. And that gives it a little bit of freedom, so this isn't getting pulled around by the lead screw. So let's put these together and we'll assemble the rest here in a second. Got that side assembled. The next step is to assemble this inside here. So this might be a little harder to get those holes lined up, but I think we can make this work. Oh yeah, not too bad. So that's mounted inside there, and you can see, well, it's not very obvious, but there's a little bit of flexibility here, and I think it doesn't need much, but it keeps defects out of the print, and that's important. The next thing is part of this that's important. So this is going to go up there, so we're going to call this the left side. We'll call this one, we'll call this left, this right, and there's this piece that has to go in there, and this allows the table one more degree of freedom. But the thing is, between the 3 of these, this needs to triangulate so that the table actually can't move, and it's locked in. So it gives these freedom to move in and out, but it keeps the table from moving. So anyway, this has to point in this way. That is held in by just 1 screw here. I hope I don't regret not putting any kind of Loctite on any of these. So that's not in far enough for that to, there we go. Cool. So that one's going to go over here, and now we'll build this one for that side. Like I said, I'm not over tightening these, but I am tightening them enough to make sure that they end up flush with the top surface of this, because that's important. Okay. So next, like I said, this one's going to go on this side. Therefore, this needs to point in that way. Okay, so you can see these are both sort of staged where they're going to go. Then we have these long bolts, or long screws, I guess. They're pretty tiny around, but these are what are going to mount this up to the bearing block. So let's do that. With this, I need to screw this in and pull this down where I want it. And we'll get it lined up just where we want it. And then these should go, ooh, that's, there we go. Once you get it, the linear bearing is going to slide. Okay, so we just got this one running a little ways. Oh, haha. Anyone catch that? and all my talking and filming, what I was getting at is through all of that talking, I put this on the wrong side. I made a point not to do that, and I did anyway. That goes to that side. This one will go to this side. Let's try this all again. There it goes, starting to come through. That's pretty cool. So you can see that this moves, but it still gives a nice, even as much as this flops around, this doesn't move and it's rock solid. That's cool. So we already got those started, so this should be pretty easy to get. Oh, wrong wrench. On the other side I had some difficulty on the second ones. So on this one, I'm just going to get these all started at the same time before I tighten any of them. It's usually good practice anyway, but... So those are in. Another rock solid setup. That's too cool. Final one is the one in the back. So just a quick note, I was getting ready to put in the back piece and I realized that I needed to use, I need to mount something on the side here. And then I realized in the instructions, they show screwing into these inserts, but there was never a step to actually put them in. So I just went ahead and put all these in really quick. It's not a big deal. I'm sure you guys have all seen putting in heat set inserts into 3D prints. But anyway, they make a part look real nice and make it a lot more effective and functional. But I just wanted to point out that I missed that. And so if you're building one of these, make sure to put your threaded inserts in first, because now I'm going to have to go back and put them in all these other pieces I just put in. All right, so now to install this back piece for the Z-axis. I went ahead and mounted this off camera, but this I think is a cable management. Looks like some spot for zip ties. Sure, we'll see more on that later. I had to put thread inserts in there for that one as well. And here too. So anyway, let's mount it. Alright, that feels pretty solid. Still does what it's supposed to. These next pieces here will hold the bearings that support the top end of the lead screws. Since the bottom is secured by the shaft coupler, these will just hold a bearing and support the top part, kind of as I'm trying to demonstrate here. Assembling these is pretty easy, just assembling screws, inserting the screws through and adding a T-nut on them so I can put them in, and then the next step is going to be installing the ball bearing, and it just is sort of a press fit on that whole part of it. And here's the thing, the only thing I'm not sure about, these bearings need to go in here like this, right? But I don't know if they need to go this way or this way. I think it makes sense to go this way. Let me look at the instructions quick, see if they tell me. I think I have a cat that's trying to play with us. Okay, so I was right. This is the way we want to do it. I thought that was going to go in a little smoother. Okay, so they fit pretty tight. They're not going anywhere. I thought they might fall out, but I think we'll be all right. Put this here. Basically goes this over that. This thing slides into here. Oh, I said that fit tight. Guess not. Earlier when I said I installed the lead screw all the way in the bottom so it was sitting on the motor, this is where that comes into play. as you can see, the lead screw doesn't protrude through the top of that bearing. At first I thought it had something to do with how I installed it, so I jumped over to the other side and installed that one. But I quickly realized that that was having the same issue, and that's when it dawned on me that I needed to raise the lead screws up a little. Here's what I'm thinking. Down there, I let this sit down as far as it could go. I think I should just lift that up just a hair. It doesn't need to be all the way down. In fact, it's probably better if it doesn't go all the way to the bottom. So we're gonna lift this up a little bit. You'll see it up here as I move it. Okay, so we're loosening it. Yeah, so I like that better. All right, now we're tightening down here. That's much better. That'll actually do something now. Hey, that's all right. Now we can do the back side. I have a little helper here. It's been cold out today. She spent most of the time in the house. You helping, Bandit? All right, we are back in business. Hey, Future Nick here. I think we're at a good point to actually stop this video so I can get this out to you. The next video is going to be pretty substantial. We're going to install the Y-axis rails, the X-axis rail, the motors, and the belts, and we're going to have pretty much everything in place for the moving components except for the hot ends themselves. Those will be in the following video. But I want to make sure I get this out to you as soon as possible so you can follow along if you're building, or if you're just enjoying this. I didn't want to have too big of a break in between videos. If you made it this far in the video, I want to say thank you. I really appreciate all the people that have been watching and commenting on these videos. It's been really nice getting back into recording and having people already interested in what I'm showing you. And I know that a lot of you are probably here for the RatRig printer. I hope to have you stay tuned because I'm going to keep building that, and we're going to take it all the way to the end, and I'll get to show you some of the test prints and some of those things as well. But I hope you also stick around, and I hope you guys have comments for future videos because I have all kinds of projects I'm excited to get into. So thanks again for watching, and stay tuned for the next one.